Have you ever wondered why a single careless remark from someone can ruin an entire day? It almost feels irrational when you take a step back. One moment you are calm, maybe sipping your morning coffee or enjoying a quiet commute, and then suddenly a stranger cuts you off in traffic, or a coworker dismisses your idea in a meeting, and your mood collapses. It is as if we hand over the keys to our emotional life to whoever happens to cross our path. This fragility is not unique to you or me, it is part of being human. Our nervous system is wired to detect threat, disrespect, or social rejection as if it were a danger to survival. Evolution designed us to be alert to the judgments and actions of others because belonging to the tribe once meant life or death. So when someone undermines us or acts rudely, our brain interprets it as a threat to dignity, identity, or worth. That ancient machinery still lives in us, even though the stakes are rarely about survival anymore. Instead of lions, our enemies are tweets, careless bosses, or people who take our parking spot. But here is where philosophy, especially Stoicism, offers an insight that neuroscience alone cannot solve. The Stoics, from Epictetus to Marcus Aurelius, believe that events themselves are neutral. It is our interpretation of those events that causes disturbance. When someone insults you, their words are just sound waves in the air. When someone ignores your message, that is only silence. Yet we inject meaning into those signals. We decide they mean disrespect, rejection, or betrayal. And once the mind attaches a story, the body reacts with anger or sadness. The Stoics urged us to separate what is within our control, our judgments, choices, responses, from what is outside our control, other people's words, their moods, the weather, the economy. The formula is deceptively simple. If it is within your control, take responsibility. If it is not, let it go. That is the heart of emotional freedom. The lesson that reactions are your choice sounds obvious when you hear it. But in practice it feels almost impossible. Most of us think emotions just happen. If someone shouts at us, we feel anger. If someone praises us, we feel pride. But notice the missing step. Between stimulus and response there is a space. As Viktor Frankl, a modern psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, reminded us, in that space lies our power to choose. We do not control the stimulus. People will say rude things. Traffic jams will happen. Bosses will criticize, but in that moment between event and reaction, we have a choice. We can feed the anger with stories about how unfair life is. Or we can pause and ask ourselves, what story am I telling here? And is it serving me? Imagine you are at work and a colleague rolls their eyes while you present your idea. Instantly, your body tightens, heart rate increases, and you want to snap back. Your brain screams, they do not respect me. But if you pause, you might realize their gesture has more to do with their bad day, their stress, or even their habitual behavior, than with the value of your idea. Maybe they roll their eyes at everyone. By creating that mental gap, you reclaim your agency. Instead of storming out or lashing back, you can finish your presentation calmly, and later decide whether the issue is worth addressing. In that simple pause, you stop being a puppet controlled by others' strings. Consider traffic, one of the most common modern triggers. A car swerves in front of you and you feel a rush of irritation, sometimes even rage. If you are like most drivers, you imagine the other person is reckless, selfish, maybe even malicious. You yell, you honk, you fantasize about teaching them a lesson. Yet the truth is you do not know their story. Perhaps they are rushing a child to the hospital. Perhaps they simply made a mistake, the same kind you have made countless times. The Stoic perspective says, you cannot control how others drive, but you can control whether you let a stranger on the road dictate the quality of your day. The moment you recognize that, the grip of anger weakens. You see the absurdity of letting someone you will never meet again determine your peace of mind. Let me give you a more personal example. A friend once told me about an incident at a grocery store. He was standing in line when someone cut ahead of him. Instinctively, he felt disrespected and prepared to confront the person. But then he remembered the Stoic idea. The insult only exists if you grant it power. So instead of saying anything, he let the person go. A few minutes later, that person turned around and apologized, explaining they had not noticed the line. My friend laughed and realized how close he was to manufacturing conflict out of thin air. The insult existed only in his perception. That day, he walked away lighter because he chose not to fuel the anger. The beauty of this approach is that it does not demand you suppress or deny emotions. Stoicism is often misunderstood as cold detachment, but it is not about becoming a robot. Anger will still rise, frustration will still appear, disappointment will still sting. The point is not to erase emotion but to prevent it from hijacking your actions. Anger is like a spark. It can either die out quickly or ignite a wildfire. The choice is yours. By pausing, naming the feeling, and reflecting on its cause, you control whether it becomes destructive or constructive. In modern psychology, this aligns with the concept of cognitive appraisal. Psychologists note that emotions are not automatic. They are shaped by the way we evaluate events. Two people can face the same insult, say, a customer shouting at them, and respond differently. One might explode in rage. The other might shrug and laugh. The difference is not in the insult but in the appraisal. The Stoics intuited this centuries ago, teaching that the mind is the author of suffering more than reality itself. Think about social media, where millions of people experience emotional roller coasters daily. A rude comment on your post can haunt you for hours, even though it was typed by a stranger you will never meet. Why does this bother us? Because we unconsciously let their opinion define us. But if you view their comment as noise, like the sound of traffic outside your window, it loses its sting. Just as noise-canceling headphones block unwanted sounds, Stoic practice trains your mind to block unnecessary emotional noise. The world is full of honking horns and random chatter. You decide whether it enters your mental space. Another example comes from sports. Athletes often face heckling crowds. Insults shouted from the stands meant to destabilize them. If they let those words enter their mind, performance collapses. The best athletes learn the Stoic trick. The words are meaningless unless I assign them meaning. They hear the noise but do not let it in. That is why they can stay calm under immense pressure. This is not just athletic training, it is philosophical training. When you start practicing this in daily life, you notice small miracles. That rude email no longer ruins your afternoon. That dismissive colleague no longer makes you doubt your worth. That family member who knows how to press your buttons suddenly loses their power. Because the truth is, they never had power in the first place. You were giving it to them. Unconsciously, reclaiming it is like taking back the steering wheel of your emotional car. Of course, this is not easy. The first step is awareness. Notice the moments you feel triggered. Instead of reacting instantly, say to yourself, I am feeling anger, or I am feeling hurt. Naming the emotion creates distance. It shifts you from being inside the storm to observing the storm. Then ask, why am I feeling this way? Is it truly because of what happened, or because of the story I told myself about it? Finally, decide, what response aligns with my values, my peace, my long-term goals? Often the answer is calm, silence, or a simple smile. Over time, these pauses accumulate into strength. You become less like a fragile vase that shatters with every touch, and more like a deep ocean that remains steady no matter how the winds blow above. People around you may still act rudely, unfairly, or unpredictably, but they cannot reach the core of your peace. That is the promise of Stoicism, not a world free of insults or problems, but a self that is unshaken by them. Think of your life as a fortress. The walls are your choices, your boundaries, your values. The enemy at the gate: insults, criticism, inconveniences cannot harm you unless you open the door from inside. Every time you react impulsively, you are handing over the keys. Every time you pause and choose, you are reinforcing the walls. In this way, you become the guardian of your own peace. And in a world that constantly tries to provoke, sell outrage, and manipulate emotions, that is not just wisdom, it is liberation. One of the most common sources of frustration in life is not the world itself but the expectations we place on other people. Deep down, we often assume that others should treat us the way we treat them, that they should mirror our values, and that fairness is the natural order of things. When a friend forgets our birthday even though we always remember theirs, when a coworker fails to support us even though we helped them countless times, or when a family member acts selfishly despite our constant sacrifices, we feel betrayed. The pain does not come merely from the action itself. But from the violated expectation, we say to ourselves, I would never do that to them. So why would they do it to me? This thought spirals into resentment. But here lies the hard truth. People are not living according to your script. They are following their own, written by their upbringing, their priorities, their circumstances, and their worldview. Expecting them to behave like you is like expecting the weather to match your mood. It is an illusion that only multiplies disappointment. Think about relationships. In almost every romantic relationship, there comes a point where one partner expects the other to understand them without words, to anticipate needs, or to mirror emotional investment. When that expectation is unmet, arguments arise. A woman might think, if I cared for him, I would never forget to call when I'm late. Why doesn't he do the same? A man might think, if I loved her, I wouldn't nag about small things. Why can't she let it go like I would? Each person is projecting their standard onto the other, assuming love means behaving the same way. But the reality is that people express love differently. One shows it through words, another through actions, another through presence. If you demand others behave like you are blind to the richness of human diversity. The wiser approach is to accept people for who they are and adjust your responses, not to constantly wrestle with who they are not. In workplaces, this is even more obvious. Some people thrive on punctuality and discipline, while others are more improvisational. Some see deadlines as sacred, others see them as flexible suggestions. If you are the punctual type, waiting for the last-minute person will drive you mad if you expect them to act like you. But here's the paradox. By clinging to that expectation, you not only stress yourself but also lose influence over the situation. The Stoic perspective reminds us, we cannot demand others conform to our nature. We can only manage our own actions. So instead of resenting the colleague who is always late, you can plan accordingly, build in buffers, or calmly set boundaries. In doing so, you protect your peace rather than sacrificing it to their habits. The modern world provides countless examples of mismatched expectations. Think about driving again. You might be the courteous driver who always signals and lets pedestrians cross. But on the road, not everyone plays by those rules. If you expect every driver to act as you do, you will spend your life fuming at their carelessness. But once you accept that the road is full of unpredictable people, you stop demanding the impossible. You realize your responsibility is to drive safely, not to reform every stranger's behavior. This acceptance transforms your experience from constant outrage to calm vigilance. The same principle applies in politics and society. We often expect leaders to act with integrity, honesty, and vision, because that is what we believe leadership should mean. When they fail, we feel shocked and outraged, as though the world has broken its contract with us. But the Stoic would remind us, why be surprised when humans act like humans? Marcus Aurelius wrote that when you wake up, remind yourself you will meet people who are selfish, ignorant, or manipulative. He was not encouraging cynicism but preparation. If you already know that people will act from their own motives, not yours, you cannot be deeply disappointed. It is like expecting rain in spring. You bring an umbrella instead of cursing the sky. Expectations also poison friendships. Many people secretly keep a scorecard. I helped you move apartments, so you should help me in return. I listened to your problems, so you should listen to mine. When that reciprocity fails, they feel cheated. But genuine friendship is not transactional. If you do things with the expectation of equal return, you will eventually resent those who cannot or will not mirror your behavior. The healthier path is to give because it aligns with your values, not because you demand repayment. By lowering expectations, you actually preserve the relationship. You free others to be themselves, and you free yourself from constant disappointment. This leads naturally to the next trap, the need to always be right. If expecting others to behave like us creates frustration, insisting that our perspective is the only correct one creates endless conflict. How many arguments spiral out of control simply because neither side will admit they might be wrong? Couples fight over trivial details like which route is faster or what year a movie came out. Friends break ties over political disagreements. Colleagues waste hours in meetings arguing over whose plan is superior. In all these cases, the real enemy is not the topic at hand but the ego's hunger to be right. It feels unbearable to imagine that we could be mistaken, Because being wrong feels like weakness. But the cost of clinging to this illusion is high: broken relationships, wasted energy, and unnecessary stress. The Stoics remind us that being right is not as important as being wise. Wisdom is the ability to discern what matters. Often, the energy we spend proving a point does not improve our life in any meaningful way. Consider a family gathering where two relatives argue for hours about politics. By the end, no one changes their mind, but everyone leaves angry. Was the victory worth the bitterness? The Stoic answer is no. If the argument does not touch your core values or immediate responsibilities, let it go. You gain peace not by winning debates but by choosing which battles are worth fighting. In friendships, the need to be right often masks insecurity. A person who constantly corrects others, who cannot let a small factual error slide, is often trying to assert superiority. They think that by always being correct, they will earn respect, but in reality, they exhaust those around them. People feel belittled rather than inspired. True respect comes not from dominating conversations but from listening, from humility, from letting others have their perspective even if it differs from yours. Sometimes love means letting someone believe what they want if correcting them brings no benefit. It is the difference between living to prove yourself and living to preserve harmony. Social media magnifies this trap. Platforms are designed to reward arguments, hot takes, and the performance of being right. People debate strangers over politics, culture, or trivial controversies as if the future of civilization depends on their comment. Hours are lost, tempers flare, and yet no minds are changed. Why? Because most arguments are not about discovering truth but about defending identity. To admit you are wrong online feels like surrendering your tribe. But the Stoic approach is radically different. You do not need to defend your ego against every challenge. If someone is wrong about you, let them be wrong. If someone misrepresents your view, let them. Your peace is worth more than your reputation in the mind of a stranger. Consider a workplace example. Imagine a team meeting where two colleagues debate which software tool to use for a project. Each insists theirs is superior. The discussion drags on, deadlines slip, and morale drops. Finally, a manager steps in and chooses one. Months later, it turns out both tools had strengths and weaknesses, and the outcome was not dramatically different. The hours spent arguing were wasted energy. If either colleague had practiced Stoic detachment, they might have said, "I think my option is good, but I can live with yours too. Let's move forward." That attitude not only saves time but earns respect for being pragmatic rather than prideful. At home, parents and children often fall into this trap. A teenager insists they know better than their parents, while parents insist their experience makes them right. Both sides dig in, and the relationship suffers. But what if one side paused and asked, "Does winning this argument really matter?" Most of the time, the answer is no. What matters is trust, communication, and maintaining the bond. By letting go of the need to be right, both sides create space for growth. The parent might say, "I think you're wrong, but I trust you to learn from your choices." The teenager might say, "I still disagree, but I respect your concern." That humility transforms conflict into connection. Even in larger society, the obsession with being right fuels division. Entire communities fracture over ideological purity tests. People leave churches, political parties, or social movements because someone did not phrase something perfectly. The need to prove correctness outweighs the need for solidarity. But if we step back, we see that being technically right about a minor detail is less important than building bridges. The Stoics teach us to ask, does this debate contribute to a good life? Or is it merely feeding my ego? If the latter, walk away. True strength is not in crushing opponents but in conserving energy for what truly matters. It takes practice to release this need. The next time you feel the urge to prove someone wrong, pause and ask, will this improve my life in any meaningful way? Will it strengthen the relationship, solve a real problem, or align with my values? If not, perhaps silence is the better response. Silence is not weakness, it is mastery. It says, I value my peace more than my pride. By combining these two lessons, stopping the expectation that others behave like you, and stopping the obsession with being right, you dismantle two of the biggest traps that steal peace. When you let go of expecting people to be versions of yourself, you free them and free yourself. When you let go of proving your correctness in every conversation, you conserve energy and preserve relationships. Together, these practices make life lighter, calmer, and richer. You walk through the world not as a fragile ego constantly threatened by others' actions or opinions, but as a steady presence who chooses battles wisely and accepts the rest with grace. People routinely overestimate the authority of other people's words while underestimating the authority of their own interpretation. Someone says, "That presentation felt flat," and the mind hears, "You're incompetent." A relative tosses off, "You've gained weight," and the heart translates it to, "You're unlovable." A manager emails, "Fix this by EOD," and your nervous system reads, "You're on the brink of being fired." Most of the damage is not in the sentence itself but in the meaning we rush to attach to it. If you slow the film, you'll notice 3 distinct frames. Words arrive, an interpretation springs up, and then an emotion follows. Detaching from other people's words means interrupting that middle frame, refusing to let instant interpretation solidify into identity. Marcus Aurelius's old reminder is concise. Most of what we hear is opinion, not fact. Most of what we see is perspective, not truth with a capital T. Treating remarks as opinions rather than verdicts is the hinge that shifts a day from turmoil to composure. The simplest way to detach is linguistic. Silently relabel what you just heard. Instead of, "He said my idea is dumb," recast it as, "He offered an opinion that he doesn't like this idea as framed." In a meeting, when a senior engineer says, "This design won't scale," notice how different your body feels if you translate the line into, "Given their assumptions and constraints." They believe this architecture may not meet future load. Their words stop being a club that knocks you down. They become a data point in a decision landscape. In personal life, too, when a sibling says, "You never visit," many people hear accusation and judgment. Try the relabel. They're expressing longing clumsily. You are not rewriting reality, you are recognizing that reality arrives to you filtered by someone else's mood, history, and blind spots. That realization, opinion, not oracle, creates a gap wide enough to choose a mature response. A second tactic is temporal. Extend the time between stimulus and reply. In the workplace, almost everyone pays lip service to taking the high road. But what makes it practical is the 30-minute rule. When a message lands unfairly, "Why did you miss this obvious bug?" you draft a reply and do not send it. You walk, you drink water, you phone a neutral colleague and read the message out loud. Because hearing it in your own voice exposes exaggerations your eyes miss. Most emails shrink after a walk. A surprising number don't require any reply at all. Silence is not capitulation. It is the assertion that your attention is scarce and you will not lease it to provocations for free. Indifference in this sense is not apathy. Your work still matters, but you detach your internal state from other people's reactions. That posture, caring about the work while being indifferent to approval, turns you from a weather vane into a compass. Third, interrogate source and incentive. Words carry different weight depending on who speaks and why. If a trusted mentor gives you a hard truth, treat it like a physician's diagnosis, uncomfortable but aimed at your good. If a passerby on the internet mocks your project, ask what authority they have over your life. Most of the time the answer is none, and your nervous system is overpaying attention to someone who has invested nothing in your outcomes. Recent reflections on narrative agency capture the shift. You cannot control the master stories people carry, but you can control how much attention you grant them, and you can change the company you keep. If a voice consistently makes you smaller, you are not obligated to amplify it in your head or in your calendar. Curate your inputs. The stories you let in are the stories you live by. Detachment is not denial. Treating words as opinions does not mean ignoring useful feedback. It means filtering before absorbing. A practical filter is the triage question set most high performers eventually adopt. Is this true? Is it actionable? Is it delivered in good faith? A comment can be true but not actionable. You're not naturally charismatic. Actionable but not true. Nobody will ever pay for this product. True and actionable but delivered in bad faith. You do not owe equal emotional access to all three. The third receives the most disciplined handling. You extract the actionable kernel. I need a clearer value proposition, and discard the poison. You're obviously out of your depth. Over time, You become a connoisseur of feedback quality. You solicit it from people with context and skin in the game. You ignore broad, cheap shots. And you neither inflate praise nor catastrophize criticism. Detachment, then, is a boundary around meaning, not a refusal to grow. In relationships, detaching from words means you stop treating phrasing as fate. Partners in long relationships eventually learn that tone often hides need. "You're always on your phone" translates to, "I miss you." "You never plan anything" becomes, "I want to feel chosen." If you swallow the surface line whole, you will fight about phones and calendars. If you listen for need, you address loneliness and priority, which are solvable. The habit that keeps couples safe is reflective paraphrase. "I'm hearing that you want more focused time with me. Did I get that right?" You have not surrendered your dignity. You have simply refused to let an imperfect sentence write the story of your bond. Detachment protects the conversation from spiraling into character assassination. Detach also from praise. People think flattery is harmless. But it is just as dangerous as insult if you outsource your self-worth to it. If a client gushes, "You're a genius. Best team we've ever hired," and you internalize that as identity, the next critical email will feel like a fall from the sky. The Stoic solution is quiet gratitude for praise without dependence on it. You recognize that applause says more about the applauder's expectations than your essence. You bank the compliment as a relationship deposit. And you return to the work. If you cannot hold compliments loosely, you will not hold criticism lightly. Both will pilot your mood. The point of detachment is to be guided by values and evidence, not by the volume of external voices. The workplace is where language most predictably misfires, because email and Slack strip away facial cues. When a product manager writes, "This release can't slip," and you read it after a 12-hour day, you might hear contempt that isn't there. Organizations that scale well institutionalize detachment through process. They document decisions, separate critique of ideas from critique of people, and reduce open-ended debate windows. They also protect focus by deliberately removing people who create communication drag, folks who multiply loops without adding insight. A clear team is a kind team. The kindest thing you can do for a project is prevent avoidable drama by pruning involvement and tightening channels. A healthy culture pairs detachment with explicit boundaries. If detachment is your inner filter for meaning, boundaries are your outer fences for behavior. Without them, you invite misinterpretation to become mistreatment. Professionals burn out not because they work, but because they work without edges. Everything spills into everything. The first edge is time. In practical terms, that means observable rules. No after-hours DMs unless something is genuinely blocking. Response time expectations stated in writing. And a shared understanding of when urgent is legitimate. The second edge is scope. A concise definition of what you own, what you consult on, and what you are merely informed of. The third edge is quality. Pre-agreed acceptance criteria. So review comments are about deltas, not preferences. Boundaries convert fuzzy resentment into clear contracts. People often resist boundaries because they're afraid of looking selfish or unhelpful. Paradoxically, the absence of boundaries produces exactly those perceptions. You say yes to everything, then deliver late or resentfully, which feels unreliable to others and corrosive to yourself. Courageous clarity is generous. Try an "I need, I can" template that is direct without drama. I need a 24-hour lead time for new requests. I can jump in same day if it's a production incident. Or, I need design sign-off by Wednesday. I can still ship by Friday if we keep copy changes under 25 words. You are not scolding. You are publishing operating instructions. Adults do not guess, they agree. In close relationships, boundaries are the difference between love and enmeshment. A parent texts you during your workday with minor errands. You used to drop everything and comply. Then simmer with anger. A clean boundary sounds like, "I'm heads down on weekdays 9 to 6. If something is urgent, call. If not, I'll handle it after 6. Delivered calmly and upheld consistently. This boundary reduces friction and restores dignity. With friends who treat you like a 24/7 therapist, your boundary can be compassionate and firm. I care about you and want to be present. Late night calls are hard on me. Can we do Sunday afternoon walks instead? Good boundaries are not barbed wire. They are garden fences with gates and hours. Detachment and boundaries mutually reinforce one another. Detachment prevents you from overreacting to the momentary sting of a sentence. Boundaries prevent that sentence from becoming a pattern. Detachment lets you read a boss's need by noon as a rushed request. Not a moral judgment. Boundaries prompt you to reply, I can hit noon if we drop the data viz. Otherwise EOD is realistic your call. Detachment calms the nervous system. Boundaries calibrate the calendar. One without the other is brittle. All detachment and no boundaries can slide into passivity. All boundaries and no detachment invites constant offense. Building these skills is less about personality and more about repetition. Start with small experiments. The next time a message spikes your heart rate, type, draft hold, at the top of your response and set a 10-minute timer. Reread the original line and strip it to neutral content what was literally asked. Reread your reply and remove any sentence whose only purpose is to prove your value or punish the other person. Replace, as I already explained, with, for clarity. Here's the option we chose on Tuesday because X. Replace, you always spring last-minute changes, with, given today's change. Here's the impact on QA. Which scope trade-off do you prefer? When you stop teaching people lessons and start offering them choices, your days get calmer and your influence grows. In high-conflict environments, escalate your boundary from soft, a preference, to firm, a rule, to structural, a process. Soft. I prefer agenda docs 24 hours before a meeting. Firm. I can't join meetings without an agenda doc. Please send by EOD prior. Structural. I've added an agenda doc gate to the calendar invite. Meetings auto-cancel if the doc is empty by 4 p.m. the day before. Systems beat speeches. If someone persists in violating the boundary, you are no longer negotiating communication style, you are evaluating fit. Reassignment or removal is not meanness. It's stewardship of the mission and care for the broader team. Again, reducing the number of voices that create noise is often the most humane move for everyone involved. Your internal script matters as much as the external script. If your self-talk says, I must answer instantly or people will think I'm lazy, you will live in reactive panic. Rewrite it to something true. I respond within agreed windows. And speed is only one dimension of professionalism. If your self-talk says, if I don't pick up every call, I'm a bad friend, you will become a resentful friend. Rewrite. I'm reliable within the commitments I make. That's how I sustain care over years. Not days. Detachment from other people's words fails if you still let their imagined judgments colonize your head. You can't master attention if your private monologue bullies you. Detachment also means refusing to litigate identity in low-trust arenas. Debates on public platforms are not designed for mutual understanding, they are designed for performance. If you must participate, treat them as open letters to the movable middle, not as trials where you must convince the loudest opponent. Keep your claims modest and your tone civil. Bow out when the exchange becomes repetitive. Strong boundary. Do not argue with bad faith actors. How do you know they're bad faith? They ignore clarifications, move goalposts, or mock rather than question. Your departure is not a defeat. It is fidelity to your mission and mercy to your attention. A different boundary guards creative work. If you let day 1 feedback define day 1 drafts, you will never find day 10 insight. Share early with a small, trusted circle. Keep the rest of the world out until the work has bones. When wider review begins, ask for the type of feedback you want, looking for logic gaps, not stylistic tweaks, and give reviewers a form that channels their comments into decisions. That form is a boundary. It prevents drift into vague dislike and returns the team to actionable change. Detachment here is remembering that a comment like, "This doesn't land for me," is data about one person at one moment. You neither dismiss it nor deify it. You put it next to your goal and your audience and decide. If you grew up in a household where love was measured by compliance, boundaries will feel like rebellion. Expect guilt. Greet it with gentleness. You can love your parents and still refuse to be conscripted into their anxieties. You can show up for siblings and still say no to chronic crisis dumping. Healthy families evolve. They adjust rituals to adult realities. A useful script is, I want to stay close, so I'm changing how I participate. Then specify. I'll join Sunday dinners twice a month and host once a quarter. Weekdays don't work for me. You are not asking permission, you are informing. If pushback comes cloaked as morality, family always sacrifices. Remember, mutual sacrifice is family. Unilateral sacrifice is exploitation. Let's address the fear hiding under both lessons. If I detach from people's words and set boundaries, won't I lose opportunities or be seen as difficult? Over a career, the opposite is more common. People with signal over noise who do not get spun up by every comment are trusted with bigger, messier problems. People with crisp boundaries deliver repeatable value. Colleagues learn that your yes means yes, your no means no, and your not now means I'll tell you when. That predictability is a professional brand more durable than charm. It also compounds. Detachment keeps you steady in the storm, which keeps relationships intact, which makes boundaries easier to uphold, which preserves energy for the next storm. Remember too that detachment is portable across domains. On the field, elite athletes practice being outcome indifferent and process devoted. They know that attachment to crowd noise is the fastest way to crumble under pressure. In creative arts, writers cultivate the nerve to keep shaping a draft despite early scorn. Applause is sweet and scorn is sharp. But neither finishes the book. In entrepreneurship, founders learn to separate feedback about the product from judgments about their person. They mine criticism for insight and ignore the rest. Across these arenas, the same principle. Choose your attitude toward events, and you'll discover a freedom that is not brittle but resilient. When in doubt, return to first principles. What can I control here? My interpretation, my reply, my availability, my standards, my calendar, my company. What is outside my control? Other people's tone, timing, and taste. Spend your attention accordingly. You can't optimize your life around suppressing every rude email. You can optimize it around becoming the person who reads rude lines as weather, not prophecy, and who has built a schedule sturdy enough that gusts do not blow the roof off. If you're new to all this, choose one experiment for the next 7 days. For detachment, treat every sentence you hear as an informed or uninformed opinion. Keep a tiny log of 3 remarks per day and write your neutral relabel next to each. Watch your mood stabilize as you stop letting words become verdicts. For boundaries, write the 3 rules that would make next week sane. Put them somewhere visible and tell at least one stakeholder each. Then enforce them once, kindly and without theater. You're not trying to win a debate about your worth. You're living like your attention is a scarce resource. Because it is. The last move is environmental. Choose the ecosystems that make detachment and boundaries easier rather than heroic. Mute the channels that gin up outrage. Unfollow the voices that keep you measuring your days by their yardsticks. Spend disproportionate time with people who give precise, generous feedback and who respect clocks. Sometimes the most stoic decision is not to white-knuckle through a toxic environment but to leave it for one where your composure is not constantly taxed. You can't change that we live in a noisy century. You can change how much noise you ingest and who you build with. There is nothing mystical about any of this. Detach from words by labeling them as opinions until proven otherwise. Slow your replies until your best self can speak. And check who benefits from your attention. Set boundaries by publishing your rules, enforcing them quietly, and building processes that protect them when your willpower is low. You will still have hard days. You will still hear sentences that sting. But the stings won't turn into infections. And the infections won't become identity. That is the real payoff. You get to keep your day, your dignity, and your direction, no matter what anyone else says. The hardest prison to escape is not a locked cell, but the invisible one built from the opinions of other people. From childhood we are trained to look outward for approval. A good grade wins applause. A mistake earns shame. A new outfit feels valuable only when someone compliments it. Even as adults, many of our choices are shaped not by our own compass but by the imagined audience in our heads. We fear embarrassment more than failure, disapproval more than stagnation. The Stoics diagnosed this disease centuries ago. Epictetus warned that if you care too much about what others think, you become their prisoner. Marcus Aurelius observed that while we love ourselves most, we paradoxically care more about other people's opinions than our own. To detach from opinions is not to become antisocial or arrogant. but to return agency to where it belongs, your own reasoned judgment. Consider how much life is wasted in the theater of reputation. A person buys a car not because it serves their needs but because it signals success. A student chooses a major not because it excites them but because it pleases parents. A professional hesitates to leave a job they hate because they dread the whispers. Why would he walk away from such a prestigious firm? Each decision is less about intrinsic value and more about audience reaction. Yet audiences are fickle. What earns applause today will be mocked tomorrow. The same crowd that cheers your rise may sneer at your stumble. Anchoring your self-worth to their shifting mood is like tying your boat to clouds you will drift without stability. Detachment means dropping anchor in deeper waters. Values, principles, a chosen purpose. Modern life bombards us with amplified opinions. Social media metrics, likes, shares, comments convert judgment into numbers that feel like a scoreboard of worth. Someone posts a photo, receives 2 likes, and feels invisible. Another racks up hundreds and feels validated. But what changed in the person? Nothing except perception. Their essence did not improve with likes nor diminish with silence. Yet because we confuse attention with value, our emotional state swings wildly. Detachment here is not abandoning platforms but refusing to outsource identity to them. You might share your work online, but you remind yourself, the likes measure audience mood, not my soul. They are data points, not verdicts. A harsh comment may sting, but you translate it into context. This reveals more about their perspective than about my worth. In that translation, you reclaim peace. One way to practice detachment is to ask a simple question whenever an opinion rattles you. Does this person have authority over the life I want to build? Imagine you publish an article and a stranger says, "This is trash." Your ego burns. But pause. Will their words alter your path? Do they hire you, feed you, or share your bed? If not, why grant them the power to rewrite your story? Conversely, if a mentor you respect offers critique, you listen closely, because they have context and a stake in your growth. Detachment does not mean ignoring all opinions, it means filtering them with wisdom. Most voices are noise, some are signals. Knowing the difference is maturity. In personal relationships, detachment is equally liberating. A friend might say, "You've changed," intending criticism, but perhaps growth requires change. Another might sneer, "You think you're better than us," when you pursue new goals. Here you face a choice. Live small to preserve their comfort, or detach from their insecurity and continue. Epictetus would remind you, if you wish to improve, be prepared to be ridiculed. Progress often offends those who prefer you stay the same. If you internalize their opinion, you shrink. If you detach, you walk your path. Detachment is not indifference to people, but indifference to shackles. At work, opinions can feel especially heavy because careers seem tied to perception. Performance reviews, promotions, reputations, aren't these built on others' views? Yes, but the distinction remains. Feedback is useful. Identity is not negotiable. A boss may say, "You're not leadership material." Detachment means you parse. This is their current perception, shaped by their biases, context, or limited vision. It may contain useful information about skills to build, but it is not a prophecy carved in stone. Many who were once dismissed later led with distinction. To detach is to treat opinions as inputs, not definitions. You hear them, weigh them, use them if helpful, discard them if not. Detachment also allows you to endure criticism without retaliation. Think of great athletes facing hostile crowds. Every missed shot invites jeers. If they absorbed those opinions as truth, their performance would collapse. Instead, they learn to hear noise as whether present but powerless. You too can adopt this stance. When neighbors gossip, colleagues judge, or strangers insult, remind yourself, these are sounds in the air, shaped by their own biases. They are not binding contracts. The true judge is your own reason aligned with virtue. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself, "I must do what is right. Other people's praise or blame is irrelevant if I know my duty." Detachment is only half the lesson. The next is silence as strength. Most people equate power with words, with quick comebacks, sharp arguments, loud rebuttals, but often the strongest move is restraint. When insulted, silence denies the aggressor the satisfaction of reaction. When provoked, Silence keeps you in command rather than handing over control. Epictetus advised his students, if someone speaks ill of you and it is true, correct yourself. If it is false, laugh. In both cases, no angry retort is needed. Silence, or calm acknowledgement, is disarming. It says, your noise cannot shake me. Imagine workplace conflict. A colleague undermines you in a meeting. Her idea is naive. Instinct screams to defend yourself publicly. But sometimes the wiser move is silence. Let the comment hang. Continue your presentation calmly, and later address the issue privately if needed. The room notices composure more than retaliation. The one who snaps appears insecure. The one who stays steady appears confident. Over time, this builds reputation more solid than any argument. Silence becomes a form of branding. This person cannot be baited. In personal life, silence can de-escalate fights that words would inflame. Couples often spiral into shouting matches not because the issue is unsolvable but because each sentence adds fuel. One partner snaps, the other responds, and soon the original issue is lost in the fire. If one person chooses silence, not cold withdrawal, but deliberate pause, the fire starves. Later, with tempers cooled, real dialogue resumes. Many long marriages survive not because both partners were eloquent but because one or both learned when not to speak. Social media again offers examples. A post provokes you. Someone insults you in comments. The urge to clap back is strong. Yet rarely does an online exchange change minds. More often, it escalates, drains energy, and ruins mood. Silence here is supreme strength. You scroll past. You refuse to engage. Your attention is your power. And withholding it is often the highest form of control. The other person expects a fight. Your silence frustrates them more than any reply. You keep your dignity. They waste their performance. Silence is also a teacher. When you listen instead of rushing to speak, you notice patterns others miss. In meetings, the one who speaks least but summarizes wisely at the end often holds most authority. In friendships, the one who listens deeply becomes the confidant. Marcus Aurelius said, "Learn to be indifferent to what makes no difference." Silence embodies this. By not reacting to trivial slights, you demonstrate what matters to you, not ego, but peace. There is a misconception that silence signals weakness. In reality, silence chosen not imposed is power. Weakness is when you cannot speak. Strength is when you can but choose not to. Silence is not emptiness, it is full of intent. It communicates, I will not let you steer my emotions. It prioritizes peace over pride. It signals mastery over impulse. Consider a story from modern business. A CEO was publicly criticized in a shareholder meeting, accused of incompetence by an angry investor. Everyone expected a heated defense. Instead, the CEO calmly thanked the investor for the perspective, promised to review, and moved on. The silence toward insult, combined with focus on substance, impressed more than any counterattack could have. The stockholders saw not weakness but composure. The critic looked smaller. The leader looked larger. Or think of personal conflict. A teenager shouts at a parent, "You don't know anything." The parent could retaliate, escalating the war. But a parent who pauses, breathes, and says nothing in the heat of the moment teaches a deeper lesson. Words spoken in anger are not binding. Later, in calm, the conversation can resume. The silence absorbed the blow, protecting the relationship. Detachment from opinions and the strength of silence are twins. Opinions lose their power when you refuse to internalize them. Insults lose their grip when you refuse to echo them back. Together, they create a fortress of inner peace. The world still buzzes with judgment and provocation, but you are no longer tossed by it. You become like a mountain. Storms may howl around you, but you stand unmoved. Practicing both is not about retreating from life but engaging more freely. When you detach from opinions, you act from principle, not pressure. When you use silence as strength, you respond with intention, not impulse. Relationships improve because you no longer overreact to every word. Work improves because you conserve energy for results rather than arguments. Self-respect deepens because you know your value is not up for public vote. Epictetus said, if someone hands you a small coin, you can choose whether to accept it. Words and opinions are like that. People hand them to you constantly. You can pocket them, letting them weigh you down. Or you can decline politely and walk away lighter. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning, today you will meet people who are rude, selfish, or ignorant, but they cannot harm your character unless you let them. Silence, then, is the visible form of that truth. By not reacting, you show you are guided by your own reason, not by their noise. In a world addicted to reaction, silence is rebellion. In a culture obsessed with approval, detachment is freedom. These are not abstract ideals but practical shields. Tomorrow, when a colleague critiques you unfairly, when a relative makes a cutting remark, when a stranger online provokes you, you have the choice. You can internalize their opinion and fire back, or you can detach. Remain silent and walk away intact. One path multiplies chaos, the other multiplies peace, and peace, finally, is the truest strength. Anger is fast because it piggybacks on a survival reflex. Gratitude is slow because it requires perspective. One scans for threat, the other searches for gifts. If you let your day be governed by speed alone, anger wins every time at the first careless comment, the first traffic slight, the first passive-aggressive email. But if you build the muscle to slow the film, you notice an old Stoic truth underneath the noise. What harms us is less the event than the story we attach to it. Gratitude changes the story. It does not Photoshop reality or deny pain. It rewrites the caption from, I'm owed, to, I'm entrusted. From, I'm targeted, to, I'm tested. From, I'm empty, to, I'm not done counting. This is why gratitude functions as an antidote to anger. It redirects attention toward what remains within your control, your judgments, your choices, your priorities, and away from the phantom control you never had over other people or external outcomes. The Stoic frame is simple and practical. You cannot adjust the world at will, but you can adjust the lens through which you interpret it. Happiness sits with reasoned choice, not with circumstance. Grasp. In practice, gratitude is not a hallmark mood, it is a method. Picture the most common anger trap: a long line at a government counter. Only one clerk, a clock that won't cooperate. The man in front of you complains loudly, your own chest tightens. What does the gratitude method do with this? Not, pretend you love waiting, but name 3 things that are still good and relevant right now. For instance, you have the documents you need. You can rearrange one afternoon call. The clerk, however slow, is actually processing your request. Nothing magical happens to the line, but your posture toward it changes. The blood pressure spike drops because you've moved your mind from the one thing out of your control, the line, to several things within it: your preparation, your schedule, your attitude. Seneca's perennial advice to be ruthless with what doesn't matter and to anchor yourself in the present where gratitude actually lives comes into focus. Wherever you are, start from the inventory of what's still usable. Grasp. At work, gratitude is often the only tool that can pry anger's fingers from your throat fast enough to keep you professional. Imagine you led a sprint for a product launch. Hours before release, QA finds a blocker. A senior stakeholder fires off a harsh message. Unacceptable. This should have been caught. Your body readies for combat. If you reply inside that chemistry, you will punish the sender or punish yourself. Either way, you'll tunnel on blame. The gratitude method inserts a disciplined detour. What's the good that remains available? Answer. A team that just surfaced a bug before customers saw it. A stakeholder who, however clumsily, cares enough to push for quality. A timeline that, while tighter, can still be adjusted with scope cuts. You reply, thank you for flagging the impact. Here are 2 options. A. Delay 24 hours and ship with the fix. B. Ship on time with the feature behind a kill switch. Preference? Notice the shift. Gratitude didn't excuse the failure. It harvested the usable parts of the moment and kept you in the driver's seat. At home, gratitude prevents ordinary friction from hardening into contempt. Your spouse promised to pick up a prescription and forgot again. Anger's story is easy. If they cared, they wouldn't forget. Gratitude doesn't gaslight you into pretending it's fine. It widens the frame. You can be grateful for the dozen ways they showed care this week that were not this errand. Grateful that you caught the miss while the pharmacy is still open. Grateful that you have a system, shared list, reminders, that can be tightened. In that posture, you can say, calmly and clearly, I need reliability on medical stuff. Let's add a recurring reminder and make me the second checker on days you're slammed. Gratitude didn't erase the ask, it delivered it without the venom that invites defensiveness. There's a deeper reason gratitude so reliably neutralizes anger. It restores proportion. Anger, especially in modern life, is often a distortion, treating a missed text like betrayal, a curt message like exile, a traffic merge like a duel. Gratitude is a proportion machine. You remember what's intact: friendships, health, and income. The fact that the problem you're facing is a problem only because other parts of your life are working. Deadlines exist because you have customers. Criticism arrives because you have a voice worth criticizing. Stoic discipline is precisely this: placing each event in its proper scale relative to your values and responsibilities. Not relative to the chemical spike of the moment. Glasp. Build the habit with cues and scripts. Cue. Whenever you feel the heat rise, jaw tight. Rapid typing. Shallow breath. Launch a 3-line gratitude ledger specific to the situation. Not generic fluff. This client is mad. Becomes, this client is invested. We lost a sale. Becomes, we learned a block. The meeting went sideways. Becomes, I found a cultural edge to fix. Script. Before I respond, list 3 usable goods. If you do this for 1 week, you will not become a saint. You will simply accumulate enough evidence that gratitude gives you better options faster than anger does. And when gratitude feels kitschy, swap vocabulary. Call it resource mapping. You're not pretending, you're identifying assets under stress. There is a trap to avoid. Gratitude is not a permission slip for people to mistreat you. It sits beside boundaries, not in place of them. Be grateful for the lesson in a harsh comment and still refuse to tolerate harassment. Appreciate a customer's urgency and still decline timeline abuse. Say, thank you, for the clarity that a relationship is unhealthy and still leave it. Gratitude manages the story, boundaries manage the terms. When both are present, you are neither naive nor bitter, you're lucid. Now, the second half of this section: criticism as a tool for growth. Most of us were trained to hear criticism as a verdict on identity. If the work is called sloppy, we hear, I am sloppy. If the presentation is labeled flat, we hear, I am boring. That identity fusion is why criticism hurts so much and why we either fight it angrily or flee from it entirely. The Stoic move is surgical. Separate the self from the act. Then examine the act hard. Epictetus's blunt coaching, be content to be thought a fool if you wish to improve, protects you from the reputational pinch long enough to extract value from the message. It's not a dare to be careless. It's permission to endure the temporary discomfort of being underestimated so you can make the work better. Glasp. Treat every piece of criticism as a puzzle to be solved rather than a punch to be absorbed. The puzzle is 4-part: source, intent, facts, takeaway, sift, source. Who is speaking and how close are they to the consequences? A peer who ships with you carries more weight than a passerby. Intent. Are they trying to help or to score points? Bad faith can still contain a truth, but you won't give them free rent in your head. Facts. What exactly is being claimed and what evidence supports it? Vague dislike is background noise. Concrete examples are gold. Takeaway. What one change would address the core of this critique? If you cannot name a change, you have not found the value yet. This sift filter turns a messy paragraph into a single actionable next step. Refactor a function. Anchor a claim to a dataset. Rehearse a transition on slide 7. A true story from engineering life. A senior reviewer left a scathing note on a pull request. This entire approach is naive and will not scale. The junior author's first draft reply dripped with sarcasm. We paused and ran sift. Source. Senior engineer with years of relevant scaling incidents. Intent. Clumsy but probably protective. Facts. No benchmarks provided, but past outages cited. Takeaway. Add a perf test. Swap the hot path for an iterative approach. And document the trade-offs. The author pushed the changes, reran benchmarks, and replied with data. The critic's tone didn't improve, but the system did, and the author's reputation rose because they converted heat into throughput. That is criticism turned into a lever. In family life, criticism is wrapped in emotion and old stories. A teenager tells a parent, "You never listen." The parent hears accusation and moves to defend. But apply Sift and Stoic distance. Source: the human you're trying to raise. Intent: to be heard even if clumsily. Facts: 3 interruptions last night. Phone in hand at dinner. Takeaway: install a simple practice phone in a drawer during meals. Reflect back what you heard before you reply. No one had to admit a global character flaw. One concrete change improved trust. Over months. This is how a household gets quieter and kinder without anyone winning. In creative work, writing, design, product criticism is oxygen if you learn to breathe it properly. Yet you must control dose and timing. Share early drafts with a small circle that knows your goal. Define what kind of critique you want. Looking for logic gaps, not line edits, is a boundary that protects momentum. When broader reviews begin, detach from style preferences masquerading as truth. If a stakeholder says, "Make it pop," your job is to translate the opinion into a measurable change. Higher contrast on CTA. Faster first contentful paint. A specific emotional beat in the narrative. Again, the Stoic discipline is to care about what you can control, craft and clarity, and be indifferent to the rest, taste volatility. Trend cycles. Performative notes. The broader Stoic stance about perception and choice applies here as well. You decide what meaning to assign to the comment and what action to take. You are not a passive target for other people's tastes. Grasp. Sometimes criticism arrives as public mockery. A founder posts a demo. Strangers dunk on latency and UI. The ego wants revenge. A better move is to mine the thread for specifics and then respond once with substance. Good catch. P95 is 820 milliseconds on mobile. Here's our plan to get to less than 400 milliseconds by month end. You didn't wrestle trolls. You spoke to the silent majority who might be evaluating your maturity. And, if you're playing a long game, you privately thank the loudest critic for pointing at something real, then you fix it and ship. Being considered a fool can lead to growth. As one popular summary of Epictetus puts it, the point is not to love humiliation, but to outgrow the part of you that needs to look invincible to keep going. Grasp. Of course, not all criticism is created equal. Some is projection, some is ignorance, some is envy wearing a lab coat. Here gratitude and criticism reinforce each other. Gratitude reframes the moment. I'm grateful to learn how my work lands in the wild. Or, I'm grateful to see the misunderstanding so I can clarify. That gratitude takes the poison out of the sting. Then your filter can do its work. Extract the actionable kernel. Discard the rest. A recent reflection on emotional control framed this cleanly. By reframing insults and criticisms, you diminish their impact and reassert authorship over your response. That is Stoicism operationalized, not preached. Grasp. To make this real, build 2 weekly rituals. First, a gratitude ledger tied to anger triggers. List your 3 most common flashpoints: late emails, messy handoffs, family schedule chaos. For each, pre-write 3 gratitude lines you can deploy on the spot. For late emails, I still own my response time. I can escalate process. This shows where the system leaks. For messy handoffs, we have teammates to share load. I can propose a template. This is practice in leadership. For family chaos, we're healthy enough to be busy. We can reslot. A chaotic day doesn't ruin a relationship. You are not manufacturing joy. You are telling the truth more completely. Second, a criticism review you actually look forward to. Once a week, revisit the top 5 pieces of feedback you received. For each, run Sift and write 1 behavior change you'll test for 7 days. Share the change with 1 collaborator. I'm trying fewer caveats in stand-ups. Nudge me if I hedge. And 1 family member. I'm parking my phone at dinner. Call me out if I slip. Constructive criticism dies without experiment. Gratitude supplies the energy to experiment without self-disgust. Workplaces that mature operationalize both practices. They hold recurring, win-loss, reviews that always start with what went right, gratitude for the team's compounding skill. Then move to what to change, criticism translated to process. They publish decision logs so critiques anchor to facts, not folklore. They incentive clarity over volume. So feedback is short, testable, and bound to outcomes. Organizations like this aren't nice because they avoid conflict. They're kind because they metabolize it. That ethos virtue as habit. Character as practice tracks with broader Stoic habits of honesty, respect, generosity, and kindness as daily work, not occasional slogans. Glasp. In families, you can steal a simple cadence, thank you and tweak. After school, after practice, after a big day, every member says one gratitude, thanks for cooking, thanks for the ride, thanks for covering my chore, and one tweak, let's set the backpack by the door. Can we finalize the carpool the night before? Children learn 2 life skills in one ritual, appreciation and improvement. Spouses exit the loop where only problems get airtime. Anger has less oxygen. Criticism no longer feels like a referendum on love. Gratitude and criticism each have failure modes. Gratitude becomes toxic when it demands you smile through harm. Criticism becomes toxic when it masquerades as care while eroding dignity. Your job is not to choose one or the other, but to pair them with discernment. Gratitude keeps your heart open. Criticism keeps your craft honest. Together they make you durable, hard to provoke, easy to coach, slow to rage, quick to adapt. If you want a one-line operating system for the next month, borrow this. Notice the spark. Name the good. Then ask for the change. Notice the spark. I'm angry. Name the good. Here's what remains usable. Ask for the change. Here's the small tweak that would improve this. It's not glamorous, but it's the kind of adult magic that turns rough mornings into neutral afternoons and combative meetings into decisions. It also aligns with the deepest Stoic claim. Your peace is a function of what you attend to and how you choose to respond. Your life improves the moment your attention follows your values rather than your reflexes. Carrying a grudge feels like holding a burning coal in your hand, waiting for the right moment to throw it. The problem is obvious. The longer you hold it, the more it burns you. People imagine that replaying the offense somehow punishes the offender, but in reality it consumes the one who clings to it. A colleague who stole credit, a partner who betrayed trust, a friend who vanished in your hour of need. These memories replay like loops in the mind, each repetition intensifying the hurt. But the Stoic reminder is stark. The past is outside your control, and carrying it into the present is a voluntary injury. Letting go is not absolving others or pretending harm never happened. It is reclaiming your peace from the grip of yesterday. Think of how grudges distort daily life. You walk into a room and see the person who once slighted you, and suddenly your mood hardens. You read a message from someone you resent, and you feel a knot in your chest before you even open it. The original harm may have been years ago, yet its shadow keeps you prisoner. This is why Marcus Aurelius insisted that what weighs on us is never the event itself but our attachment to it. An insult, once uttered, is gone. What remains is the story we retell. To let go of grudges is to put down that story, not because the offense was small, but because the cost of carrying it is larger than the benefit of holding it. In families, grudges can last decades. Siblings stop speaking over inheritance disputes. Parents and children stop visiting because of words exchanged in anger years ago. Ask each party today what the fight was about, and often they cannot remember the details, only the bitterness. The Stoic approach would be, what matters now is the present capacity for virtue. Can you act with fairness, compassion, and reason today? If yes, then yesterday's injuries need not control you. Imagine the relief of reconnecting after years of silence, realizing that the anger was a ghost that haunted more than it protected. At work, grudges sabotage collaboration. A manager overlooks you for promotion, and you spend months subtly resisting their requests. A peer criticizes your idea in front of leadership, and you withhold cooperation on their projects. The original slight is magnified, and your own effectiveness shrinks. Seneca warned against this trap. Resentment poisons not the offender but the offended, because it ties your present choices to a past you cannot alter. The Stoic cure is pragmatic. If the relationship still matters, engage with clarity and boundaries. If it does not, disengage entirely, but do not live in the half-life of simmering grudge, because that keeps you tethered to the offender more than free from them. Letting go does not mean excusing injustice. A friend cheats you out of money. A partner lies. A company exploits you. Justice may require consequences, and you may rightly pursue them. But once the action is taken, the emotional residue must be dropped. Justice without letting go becomes vengeance, and vengeance corrodes the avenger. Epictetus would say, "You cannot control whether others act unjustly, but you can control whether you let their injustice colonize your soul." File the lawsuit, set the boundary, end the contract, but free your mind from replaying the betrayal at night. To practice letting go, start with scale. Ask, will this matter in 5 years? Many grudges fail this test. A rude driver, a curt email, a forgotten invitation, none will shape your life in half a decade. Yet they can ruin your mood in the present. If it won't matter in 5 years, why let it matter for 5 minutes? For deeper injuries, where forgiveness feels impossible, the Stoic move is to shift focus. You let go not for their sake but for yours. You choose peace over poison. Here's a real example. A woman I knew carried anger toward her father for decades because he dismissed her career choice. Every success she achieved, she secretly framed as proving him wrong. When he passed, she realized the bitterness had shaped her identity as much as his words had. Only then did she see that her career could have been driven by love for the work instead of rebellion against judgment. Letting go earlier would not have excused his dismissiveness, but it would have freed her from being tethered to his ghost. The 10th lesson, letting go of grudges, completes the Stoic toolkit because it integrates all the previous lessons. To let go, you must accept that reactions are your choice. You must stop expecting others to behave like you. You must drop the obsession with being right. You must detach from words and opinions. You must set boundaries so injuries do not repeat. You must use silence as strength, gratitude as reframe, and criticism as information rather than insult. Each of the prior lessons is a practice in loosening the grip of ego. This final one is the culmination, releasing the grip entirely. Imagine the life that results from embodying all 10 lessons. You walk through days less reactive, because you know your emotions are yours to govern. You stop demanding others conform to your code, and you accept them as they are. You no longer exhaust yourself in trivial arguments, because you choose peace over pride. You separate your worth from fleeting words and filter opinions wisely. You establish boundaries that protect your time and energy. You detach from gossip and noise, holding steady like a mountain amid storms. You practice silence when provoked, gratitude when angered, and you mine criticism for growth. And when the deepest injuries occur, you do not chain yourself to them, you let them go. Not because they were small, but because your peace is large. This is Stoic emotional mastery, not a denial of feelings, but a refusal to let them dictate your destiny. It is the art of living with composure in a world that constantly tempts you to outrage. The final lesson reminds you that grudges are voluntary chains, and you have the key in your pocket. To live free, you must be willing to use it. So here we are, at the end of this journey, and I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, what would your life feel like if you truly lived by these 10 lessons? What if you could walk into every situation, conflict at work, arguments at home, insults from strangers, and instead of being pulled by every emotional current, you stood like a mountain, steady and unmoved? We've walked through a map of freedom tonight. You've seen that reactions are always a choice, that expecting others to be like you only multiplies disappointment, that the obsession with being right costs more than it ever gives. You've discovered how to detach from words, filter opinions wisely, set boundaries without guilt, and wield silence as a weapon of composure. You've seen gratitude not as sentimentality, but as an active practice that rewires anger into clarity. You've even seen criticism, which once felt like attack, transform into fuel for growth. And at the end, we came to the final test, the hardest, but also the most liberating: letting go of grudges. What, after all, is a grudge but a story that chains you to yesterday? A parent who wasn't there, a partner who betrayed, a boss who humiliated, a friend who walked away. You carry the weight as though keeping it proves something, that you were wronged, that you deserve justice. But the years pass, and justice doesn't arrive, and the only person still bleeding is you. The Stoics never promised a world free of injustice, they promised a mind free of captivity. To let go of grudges is to refuse to be a lifelong victim of someone else's actions. It is to say, I am more than what was done to me. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal each morning, reminding himself of the rude, selfish, ignorant people he would meet that day. He wasn't resigned, he was prepared. He knew that others' behavior was outside his control, but his response was always his own. Epictetus, once a slave, Taught that while your body can be shackled, your mind is invincible if you choose it. Their wisdom reaches across centuries to us, whispering the same truth. Freedom is not when the world is quiet. Freedom is when you are steady, even while the world screams. Letting go is not about forgetting. It's about choosing what deserves a seat at the table of your attention. Some hurts deserve justice. Yes, but justice is action, not obsession. You can take the action and release the obsession. You can file the lawsuit, end the relationship, change the job, and then free yourself from carrying the bitterness into every tomorrow. Anger is a spark, but a grudge is a bonfire that never goes out. If you want peace, you must stop adding wood. Think of your own life. What would happen if you finally put down the coal you've been carrying? What space would open up inside you if you stopped rehearsing the betrayal? The slight, the cruel word? That space, that lightness, is where joy lives, where love re-enters, where clarity breathes. It doesn't excuse the offender, it frees the offended. And that, in the deepest sense, is victory. If these lessons resonated with you, remember, mastery is not achieved in one night. It is a practice. Each pause when anger rises, each boundary calmly enforced, each silence chosen over escalation, these are bricks. And brick by brick, you build a fortress. Not a fortress that isolates you, but one that shelters your peace, so you can love more freely, work more wisely, and live more deeply. And so, as we close, I want to invite you once again, if this video gave you even a spark of strength or a moment of clarity, let it ripple outward. Like this video, share it with someone who needs these reminders, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring together. If you want to go a step further, you can use the super thanks button, a way of saying not just, "I watched," but "I believe in this work." Your support keeps this channel alive and allows me to create more long-form journeys into the heart of philosophy. But more important than any like or share is what you do after this video ends. Tomorrow, when the insult comes, when the criticism lands, when the old memory surfaces, will you let it own you, or will you pause, detach, and choose differently? Remember, between stimulus and response lies a space. In that space lies your freedom. That is the essence of Stoic emotional mastery. You don't need the world to stop offending you to live peacefully. You only need to stop handing over your peace so cheaply. And once you taste that freedom, once you learn the art of living unbothered, you'll wonder why you ever lived any other way. So hold this close. You are not the sum of insults you've heard. You are not the grudges you've carried. You are not the judgments strangers made. You are the choices you make in the quiet space between what happens and how you respond. And in that space, you are free. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Until next time, stay calm, stay present, and keep building the life no storm can shake.